This is All India Radio. In World News Hotspot, now we bring you a discussion on India-Japan Special Strategic and Global Partnership to mark the 70 years of India-Japan diplomatic relations. The participants are Ms. Deepa Gopalan Vadva, former ambassador to Japan, and Nilova Roy Chaudhary, journalist.
Good evening. India's relations with Japan are among its most valuable assets in the sphere of foreign policy. As close friends and democratic partners across Asia, India and Japan now share special strategic and global partnership. The two countries first established their diplomatic relations on 28 April 1952. And as the two countries prepare to celebrate 70 years of the establishment of their bilateral relations, they decided to have a special logo which has been designed through public participation. This special logo depicts a peacock and a green pheasant, which are respectively the national birds of India and Japan. The pheasant forms the numeral 7 with its tail, and the peacock forms the numeral 0. The logo symbolizes the bond of friendship between the two countries. Japan was the first country that Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited outside of South Asia soon after he became Prime Minister in 2014. And Ambassador Deepa Gopalan Vadva, who joins us this evening, was India's ambassador to Japan at that point of time. Deepa is going to take us through this relationship and explain what makes this so special. Good evening, Deepa.
Good evening, Nilova. Lovely to be on this program.
How would you describe the current phase of India-Japan relations, and what are some of the key features which make it so special?
Right, Nilova, as you yourself said, what we share with Japan is a special strategic and global partnership. And, what does this really mean? This means an engagement and a deepening and ever-widening engagement across the spectrum of political relations, economic partnerships, people-to-people contacts, very importantly, security and military relations. So it's an extremely rich and an extremely substantive relationship where we engage now not only bilaterally, but we also engage in trilateral formats, in minilateral formats such as the Quad. And what we really are doing is going beyond the bilateral relationship into the larger strategic space of the Indo-Pacific. And not only there, we're also looking to work together on global issues, such as, for example, in the UN. Both of us have been working together for the expansion of the permanent membership of the UN Security Council, as you know. So, there is really no issue that I can think of where India and Japan don't work together.
Before Prime Minister Shinzo Abe had to resign in 2020, he and Prime Minister Narendra Modi had formed this, they were really like close friends. It has been their sort of personal friendship also gave a huge fillip to this particular relationship, carrying forward in things like, Benares and Kyoto being twin cities, and all kinds of things happened. But is it something that, is the relationship something that requires the kind of fillip that is given by personal interventions by prime ministers, or is it now something that has acquired a life of its own?
I think certainly this relationship, the strength of the relationship really, Nilova, is that, it goes far back into history. It goes back to our cultural and civilizational ties. It goes back to the fact that we are two major democracies of Asia. In fact, they say that they're the oldest democracy of Asia, and we say we are, of course, the largest democracy of Asia. And what does this mean? That I think we ascribe to similar values. This is really very important in international relations. And, one interesting thing is that actually the new phase in our relations, which started in 2000, started during the NDA government, NDA 1. But it was continued with equal, I think, vigor during the UPA 1, UPA 2, and then NDA 2. So what I'm really trying to say is that there is bipartisan support to deepen this relationship, to be committed to this relationship by political parties on both sides. So you had initially the LDP, and you started by Prime Minister Modi on the Japanese side when it started. And then in between, you had another government, you had the TJ government. It made no difference at all. On our side, we've had the NDA, we've had the UPA. Yes, personal relationships do make a difference. relations. And there was this very special relationship, that there was a special chemistry between our Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Abe. But on the other hand, Prime Minister Abe, who has been a great votary for good relations with India, was also, in fact, during his time, he conferred the highest civilian award ever given to any foreigner on Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. So, irrespective, I think, of the political parties or the leadership, today the relationship has such a strong intrinsic strength that I think it is on its own.
India has this system, annual summits with Japan. It's one of the very few countries with which India does have this actual mechanism other than Russia. And, so obviously there is a lot of heft that goes into this relationship. Now, what is the status of economic relations at this point of time? Have they actually grown to the level that, both countries are happy with? Or what are the sort of lacunae that still exist?
So, Nilufer, there's much to be happy about the political relationship and actually the growth of security and defense relations between our two countries. You just mentioned the annual summits. And yes, actually, India has these kind of annual prime ministerial level summits only with two countries. We have it with Russia and Japan. But in the case of Japan, they have such a system only with India. And, it means a lot, because every year when our heads of government get together, what they do is they review the relationship. They look at what can be done to strengthen it further. So it is an absolutely wonderful mechanism that is there. Now to come to the economic relationship certainly has grown hugely from the time that we began. And I really go 2 decades back. Because if you look at the period before that, what you find is that the ballast of the economic relationship was really development cooperation. And Japan really has been our largest and most meaningful development cooperation partner over these 70 years. But thereafter, I think it's certainly the beginning of this century and thereon, what we have seen is growing trade and investment relations between the two countries. And right now, I think bilateral trade is about the $16 billion kind of FTA, which we call CEPA, between the two countries in 2011. We also have a growing number of Japanese companies in India, which are almost about touching 1,500 from, a very, very paltry start. So all that is there. But yes, I think there certainly is a feeling that they could do so much more, because the logic of the relationship and, the very clear complementarities of our two economies really inspire us, force us to, have a much more meaningful economic relationship that we have. And why do I say it? Because, the size of the Indian market, we just look at the strengths of the two countries and they match quite perfectly. So I do believe that this is an area where we've got to work much harder, and there are efforts from both sides to be able to do that.
India and Japan have also tried, I won't say counter the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, but, to offer alternatives to countries in the neighborhood for a more equitable, shall we say, development of infrastructure facilities. Now, has this Asia-Africa Growth Corridor initiative that was mooted during Mr. Abe's time particularly, has that really taken off? Is there a prospect to that?
Well, it wasn't such a formal initiative, as it were. It was really, I think it's been given such a moniker, but actually, while we were working, we cooperate together and we have a common perspective on the Indo-Pacific and the growing importance of the Indo-Pacific, we did say that it made a lot of sense for us to work together in other Asian countries and in African countries, where both of us have some kind of experience. India has been there for a long time, has its own footprint in Africa, and so has Japan. And therefore, with their technology and financial resources, along with our own experience of Africa, could make a difference. So again, here, there's a great logic to us working together. What did happen was that they identified a few projects, one in Bangladesh, one was in Myanmar and Sri Lanka and Kenya, at the last summit. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we haven't been able to have these annual summits, and hopefully it will happen in the 70th year. And, there has been progress. You must have heard of what happened in Sri Lanka. I think there was a little bit of a problem in Sri Lanka, but hopefully we can work together. And that was really because of the Sri Lankan government. But other than that, I think the project in Bangladesh is doing well. And, this is an area of great potential. Again, this is an area we must work together much more on it in a much more focused manner. What is happening now is I think the two prime ministers did ask Indian and Japanese industry to be in the lead and are facilitating that so that both can coordinate together. So I do believe that, once both countries are over this challenge of the COVID pandemic, which we have been facing, I'm sure we will sit down and look at possibilities in this area.
As you very rightly said, the security aspect of the relationship has grown exponentially. And again, India has, in fact, the first of the 2+2 foreign and defense ministerial meeting initiatives happened also with Japan. Now, what makes this so special in terms of, given the distance, you would think that, wow, I mean, does it really make a lot of sense? But the Indo-Pacific, I think these two countries sort of really form the fulcrum, as it were, of all of our policies. Would that be a correct assessment?
You talked about Prime Minister Abe, and I'll just go a step back. The concept of the Indo-Pacific was really a construct, something that came from Prime Minister Abe, because he believed that these two oceans, and the not only the economic, but the strategic future of these two oceans was absolutely joined. And there were, bookends, as it were, on two ends. One would be Japan and one would be India, and that we could work together. There's been similarly, he was the one who proposed the Quad with India playing a very important role in it. And the focus was very strategic. So what we have seen is that, again, starting from about 2008, that the defense and security relationship between the two countries, from almost negligible, has reached this state right now when, we have joint exercises across the three militaries. We have the Malabar exercise, and you mentioned the 2+2 that we have now at the ministerial level. So that has become a very important part of our relationship, because I think both of us, the unspoken, not very, very clearly stated fact is that both of us countries are facing the challenge of a very assertive China that does not play by international rules. And, we do see that there is much to be done in terms of, where we can work together for the peace and stability of the Indo-Pacific.
So basically, also both are traditionally maritime powers. If I'm, going back into history, I mean, both Japan and India being major maritime powers, I think it makes a lot of logical sense for both to collaborate massively in the Indo-Pacific area in terms of their maritime domain and security prospects. But why is it that nobody specifically really does, talks about the nature of the economic relationship being still so askew? Why is it that, say, for example, China and India have this massive trade relationship? Why does India and Japan, with all of everything going in their favor, why is it just barely 60 million? I mean, billion. It somehow falls very short. Why is that?
I must tell you that the logic of an economic relationship is, seldom just good sentiment or good political relations. They both, in all the entire region, be Japan, be China, be India, it's really dictated by the market. And so therefore, I mean, in what China is today, Japan has a huge role to play in the development of infrastructure and the setting up of industry. Honestly, I mean, Japan perhaps has been the single largest foreign contributor into, the economic power that is China. And therefore, we are hoping that we can have a similar relationship between Japan and India. But, that takes time. It does take time. And what also happens is, in today's world, you have established kind of supply chains that are there. There is, Japan has a lot of investments in Southeast Asia. And Japan also increasingly has been, pushing for groupings such as RCEP, where we are not there, because it would very much like us to be part of that. So it will take a while. I mean, we do have a CEPA, free trade agreement, which, as I said, unfortunately has not taken off as we expected it to. But we will relook at it. I think really the way out is I will give you three segments of this. One is the development cooperation. I think the development of infrastructure in India, we never count it in the economic relationship. And that contribution of Japan is absolutely unmatchable. I mean, just look at any of the major flagship projects of India in terms of infrastructure, and you have Japan there, whether it is the Delhi Metro, whether there's a Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor. I mean, there are any numbers. And now, of course, the high-speed rail. So there, that development cooperation, there's a huge, Japan as a partner contributes hugely to the economic development of India. And then you have trade. And trade, you have to have something that matches. And I think more focus has to be on it. Japan generally is not a very easy country to, sort of open up trade with. There are a lot of issues such as non-trade barriers, I think very often that, Indian companies complain of. But in terms of investment in the sense of FDI, yes, this is an area where certainly Japan can do more. But where, interestingly, Japan is very interested and has been doing a lot really is in the startup space of India. And, I was reading the other day that out of about 20 odd unicorns that we have in India, that almost as many as half have been funded by Japan, with co-funding by Japan. So this is a new area. There are horizons that are being opened up in the economic relationship, but this is an area certainly which requires much, much more focus, much more. I think the potential is much more than what is really happening on the ground, what is happening in reality.
And in fact, the northeast of India is another area that they're very interested in. And you now actually have cherry blossom festivals and so on and so forth happening in Shillong, I believe, which is definitely a direct result of the sort of Japanese influence in that part of the world. But I believe we have run right out of time. And thank you very much, Deepa. It was a fascinating getting to know.
Thanks, Nilova. That was wonderful. And hope to see you soon when this wave wanes.
You were listening to a discussion on India-Japan Special Strategic and Global Partnership to mark the 70 years of India-Japan diplomatic relations. The participants were Ms. Deepa Gopalan Wadhwa, former ambassador to Japan, and Nilova Roy Chaudhary, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on Air. This program is also available on our YouTube channel News on Air Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.